To the Heads and Volleys podcast with me, Lee Dunn. All right, Heads and Volleys, I have a brilliant guest today. His name is Mark Savvides. I'll let him introduce himself, but I am really excited because Mark and I first connected. He was taking his advanced national diploma and I was getting my feet wet and instructing on that diploma. So, Mark, welcome to the show.
Cheers, Lee. Yeah, cheers for having me. Thank you.
So you want to give us a little background cover, kind of who you are, where you're from, what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in London. I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in football studies, which people in USA don't quite believe is true, at the Southampton Solent University. I then came to California in 2014 and luckily enough been here ever since. Currently the U9 to U10 technical director, so a lot of my passion is currently in the younger ages. Where I am, which is based in Oakland, and I currently hold my USSFB license.
A quick question on football studies. What was that? What does that entail? Because my degree was in physical education, which was a traditional route, and so I know there's probably people listening that are dreaming of studying football at university. So what was that?
Well, honestly, when I started doing it, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be easy. It's just football. Learn how to win games as a coach. Learn how to play a bit better, and you're sorted." But no, it was all about the psychology of players, sociology, fitness, nutrition. The big thing I got away with it was how to connect with players. I ended up doing my dissertation on motivation in sport. So motivation in youth athletes. Are they intrinsically motivated? Are they extrinsically motivated? What drives them to be successful? But as well as that, there was coaching models. That's where you started getting your licenses. So if you had your level 1, they'd put you on your level 2. If you had your level 2, they'd push you towards your way for B. So, it wasn't just the coaching aspect of it. It was the sociology of players, psychology of players, how to connect. It was in so much key detail. And I think doing them 3 years of the degree really helped me move over here. Because as you know, in America, everything's about mental health and are you connecting with players? How can we trust you with our son, with our daughter? So if anyone's thinking about doing the degree at Southampton Solent University, I really recommend it. I know you have a few young listeners that maybe finishing school at college, but honestly, it was the best 3 years of my life.
That's really interesting that there's so much around the game that you cover that you probably didn't even think about. And then looking at, you've got your B, I just completed my A, that there's very little content around the psychological side of it. So you talk about motivation for players and the typical level of motivation. I don't know if you read the book Drive by Daniel Pink, and he talks about the different levels of motivation. Traditionally, motivation 2.0 was it's you reward good behavior and you punish bad behavior, and that's how you motivate people. But that's not the case with kids, right?
Well, that's the thing, especially these days, positive reinforcement goes a long way. Unfortunately, still in coaching in any sport, whether it's soccer, baseball, basketball, you still have the crazy coaches who just think that motivating kids is yelling at them at 100 miles per hour, loud voice, and that'll make them work harder. But in this day and age where people might be a little bit more sensitive, positive reinforcement goes a long way. And getting to know the players, connecting with the players, just asking them how their day is. How's your day? How's it been today? If you do that at the beginning of your session, you really grasp where they're at, where they're feeling out of 1 to 10. Are they a 10? Can you get on their case today? Are they a 2 or a 3? Do you need to be a little bit more gentle? And if you just show your players that you care, that's gonna come a long way in development, especially with the young kids. Now, I'm not just saying with the young kids only checking to see how they are. With older kids, 17, 18, 19, they have a lot of different things going on in their lives. But, just checking in, showing you care, what motivates them. It might be their best friends coming to practice. They're motivated to work hard with them. It might be doing a 2 versus 2 in practice and you're pairing them up with their best friend. That's going to make them work harder. It might be making a kid a captain for a game. They want to feel extrinsically motivated. They want to be given a reward. It might be letting one of the kids take the trophy home after a tournament. But getting to know your players and connecting with them, I feel, is crucial.
It's so it seems so simple, right? When you say it like that, like just get to know your players. And I know it's difficult, and we'll get on to even just a single coach's workload and looking at your workload. But I coach two teams, and in dealing with two teams, I'm looking at 30 plus or minus players. So getting to know that many players, it definitely takes effort, but it's so rewarding. And the best thing I've done this year, if anyone takes anything away from me, add all of your players' birthdays to your calendar. And then if they're old enough and they've got a cell phone, or if you have their parents' number, then you text them, you call them on their birthday and just say happy birthday. And little things like that just help you to connect with the person. And this is important, that it's the person. It's not just a player. It's not someone who's going to take you on to win the state cup or win a tournament, but this is a person that we're working on to become a better person in society and not just a player. So if I like just to hit on that of just connecting with the people and understanding who they are and really, really getting to know them as an individual first, I think is so important. So I want to move through your role, your day-to-day. You hold multiple roles. So you coach multiple teams, you have a technical director role, and then you do a lot of other stuff too. So give us a little insight on that, right?
Yeah, so I do, I currently coach 3 teams at Montclair Soccer Club. That's where I'm the technical director for U9 and U10. But then also Cal Berkeley Women's Club team, I do that. And then I've got high school as well. So technically throughout the year, there's 5 teams that I coach, and they vary in ages. So my youngest team is U8, and then my oldest team is adults. And I feel probably one of the hardest parts is when you go from session to session and you have to change and adapt your entire personality. You can't talk to adults how you talk to your U8, but then you can't talk to your U8 how you talk to adults. So being able to have multiple different personalities, which is, I don't know if it's healthy or not, but it's an important skill and an important trait if you are going to coach men, women, younger, olders. But then you try and balance the workload, right? You try and balance the schedule, the session planning. If you're a coach that has 2 similar teams, you can maybe get away with planning one session and duplicating that and maybe changing it for the players that you have. If you have 5 teams and they're different levels, different ages, you might have to plan 5 sessions. And I know you're like me. I plan every session in every detail. Every key detail takes me 30, 45 minutes sometimes just to plan a session that I've even done before, but I want to tweak it for the players that I have this time. So you could be spending 3-4 hours sometimes just planning sessions, and then you're in your car, you're driving from session to session. I know sometimes in the season I'll have a travel session, but they'll be at 3 different venues because of permits. So then you're rushing your car, you're taking down your goals, you're taking down your bonus, you're putting them back up, you're setting it up, you're running your exercises, you're taking the goals back down, you're getting them back in the car, and you're off again. And, you know, people think that being a coach is an easy life, right? You do a session midweek, you get to the game, you win on the weekend, then everyone's happy. But I'm hoping, you know, this podcast can just give people that maybe aren't coaching yet an insight into it's not all rainbows and butterflies. There's a lot of hard graft behind it, but it is extremely, extremely rewarding.
I know even just the thought of that, and I've been doing it this winter too in San Francisco, where I'm literally running off the field. Thanks, boys. Give me your pennies. And then I'm getting to the next session, and the next kids are complaining and asking why the pennies are wet, why they're still steaming, and that's because the group just before just worked their socks off in them. So I know exactly how you go on there, and I'm sure there's many coaches listening too that deal with this exact same thing. So then to go to step back from the soccer side and to go back to kind of what your degree was in, and then thinking about connecting. How do you connect with that many players, that many teams? We talk about these kind of team bonding exercises where we go out and do whatever we do with them and host dinners or what have you between games. But how do you set that up for 5 teams?
I mean, for me, the easiest way is to just break it down into key moments of the season. So before the season, I think it's crucial to have a pre-season party. Usually that's good to be hosted at a parent's house, because then the parents can get to know each other as well. And if the parents get to know each other, the kids then get to know each other, and it makes the season much more fluid. Throughout the season, then you then just start to break it down. Have a look at your away games. Do you have far-traveled games where you can maybe book a hotel the night before? Do you have a tournament where there's 2 games in a day where you're trying to fill something in the gap? Is there a big state cup game, knockout round, where after, regardless of the win or the loss, you're going to enjoy the journey together and you're going to go out for a meal? Birthdays, as you just said about the putting birthdays in your phone, I've never actually thought of that, and it's definitely an idea I'm going to take from you. But birthdays, we had one recently, and we went foot golf. And for those of you that don't know, it's literally golf, but the hole is bigger and you strike balls. There's 200-yard holes, 300-yard holes, and that is fantastic. That is really, really fantastic for the team. And I tell you why. Because the parents join in, and then the parents understand how hard soccer is to play. And then they're like, oh, I didn't know it was this hard. I can't even kick the ball straight. And then all of a sudden, they give their kids a little bit more leeway on the weekend after they've had a round of soccer golf. I'll tell you that. So that's a good one.
That's a real good idea. I like that. Yeah, put them in the place a little bit.
Oh, exactly. They don't know what to do. They start toe punting the ball. It's going in the river. I had honestly, I've had parents gone in the water numerous times. They can't get it in the hole. They're getting angry. The kids are laughing at them. But if you can celebrate little things like that and bring the team together as much as you can, and even the parents, because at the end of the day, especially in America where parents are paying so much money, you need to get them on board. And I know a lot of coaches that they're great with a kid, they're brilliant with a kid, but they don't involve the parents. And that's where little niggles can start to come, and little arguments and little complaints. So if you can get the parents on board and do exercises and activities and team cohesion stuff where the parents are involved as well as the kids, you've got a real route for success there.
I like that. That's a good idea. We talk about this team bonding, but the idea of parents too. And we could probably go on another tangent about the pay to play model and people pushing back against it. But the model is what it is. And I don't think that we necessarily have a life if the model isn't the way it is, or it's definitely a very different life. But you look at, if you involve everybody, this is an investment that parents are making, and they want to know they're making a good investment. And if they're in a good environment, then we all have a good time, and they're brought in. You hear coaches complain about parents all the time, but if we take this simple approach of just getting to know them as well as their players, it just makes so much sense.
Oh, the parents can be your best friend.
So then let me ask you about your mentality. You're running between sessions, like you said, you're packing your goals away, you're putting them back up as quick as you can, you're scrambling around all the time. So do you have some staples that is who you are for every session that you go to? And I refer back to a podcast I did recently with the psychologist Dan Abrahams, and we talked about the game face and this idea of this almost persona of who you are as a coach. So do you have kind of skills or tips and tricks that you are using when you're running between sessions or when you're overwhelmed with triple days?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the first thing for me, and it's most importantly, is to have a positive mindset. You have to leave your problems in the car, whether you're running between sessions, you're driving to your session, you're driving to your games, etc. You've got to have a positive mindset. You've got to leave your problems behind. To these players, especially with practice in the evenings, they've been looking forward to this moment the whole day. They probably get into school, talking to their friends, oh, I can't wait for practice later. And then the next subject at school comes, oh, nearly practice, 4 hours till practice, 3 hours till practice, gets to end of school. Oh, I can't wait, I'll see you at practice. It's the best thing for these kids per day. They can't wait. They can't wait to get to practice. The last thing they need is a coach who's arriving, had a bad day, yelling at them. All of a sudden, the whole day has come crashing down for these kids. It's literally like, it's Christmas tomorrow, Christmas tomorrow, Christmas tomorrow. They wake up on Christmas Day and you tell them Santa's not real. It has that negative effect on these kids. So if you can have that positive mindset, be happy. Everyone has problems. Every single person in life. You have problems as a coach, your family members, your friends, the kids. But we have to remember that this is the kids' game. This isn't our game. We're not here to ruin their day. We're here to help them get better and improve. And the only way we can do that is with a smile on our face. I think that's crucial.
Excellent. I love that. Just the whole idea of you are portraying, or you are setting the tone by your personality. So like you said, if you're stressed or you're shouting or something's bothered you earlier on and you bring that to the field, that has a knock-on effect on the entire environment.
100%. I mean, don't get me wrong. As coaches, we have great sessions and we have bad sessions. And One thing that even to this day I can improve on. I can have a bad session, I could have a bad performance on a weekend, and then I'm driving to my next practice or next game, and I'm still angry when I arrive. I'm like, oh, okay, that was not good. But how can I improve? What could I have done better? And as you're thinking about that, what can I do? What can I do better? You got to think, how can I use this as a learning experience? So you put that to the back of your mind. You go, right, I'll think about it later on. I'll reflect on my way home. Time for my next session. Time for my next game. Let's give these kids the best possible experience they can have, because the best possible experience they have, the more they're going to develop, the more they're going to get better.
Well, brilliant mindset. So let me, you and I touched on a couple of things that we really want to dig into here. And one of the first ones is the idea of 1v1s and how 1v1s are brought into almost every environment. I think a lot of people will embrace a 1v1 in certain ways. Sometimes it can be stale, sometimes it can be creative. So where are you at on the idea of 1v1s in your practices?
Oh, for me, they are absolutely crucial, especially at younger ages. Now, personally, I had U19 boys last year, and even with the cowgirls and the high school girls that I have at the moment, I still smash 1v1s. I think they're crucial. But for the younger ages, it's how you start loving the ball. So U8, U9, U10, even before that, some programs have U4s in this country. If you start your session with 1v1s, by the time they get to 9-a-side, 11-a-side, they're going to be so comfortable on the ball in any area of the field and be able to outplay their opponent 1v1. It is so crucial for development. And I feel so passionate about 1-on-1 because this year in my high school season, some of my best 1v1 players have been out injured, concussions, and we have absolutely struggled to break teams down, but we are better than. On paper, we should be winning 4-0, 5-0. You take away the players that can outplay their opponent in a 1v1, and all of a sudden we're struggling. You can't break down a deep block. You can't break out of a high press. You can't create chances. You can't break a pressure off the dribble. And it will take coaches to lose their best players in 1v1s to realize how important it is at a young age.
So then how do you bring 1v1s in? So I guess we could kind of cover how you might do it with younger ages and then with older ages too. So thinking about a classic kind of 1v1 face up, I pass you the ball or I dribble at you and we play a 1v1. You have other ways that you do this. You have kind of maybe some sort of circuit or something that you implement.
So I like to make my 1v1 game realistic. So I mean, of course, you can do the simple face-up, I pass you the ball, the typical tryout process, right? You've got the back-to-goal ones where you're maybe developing a 9 with a centre-back behind them, looking at how you unbalance them and get beyond them. But there's simple ways of doing 1v1 to make a game realistic. So if you start with like a 7 playing back into a centre mid, and then the centre mid switches out to the 11, and then the 11 goes 1-on-1 with the opposition too. So then all of a sudden you've worked on switching the ball, switching the play, keeping your width for the switch. You receive the switch, then you drive at the opposition fullback. And then all of a sudden you've got game realistic practices where you're working on your 1-on-1, you're developing your 1-on-1s. And when it gets to the weekend, these players have been in this situation numerous times before where they're so comfortable, the ratio of success will be a lot higher.
I'm so glad that you gave that example, because that is something that I think people will, and so maybe some beginner coaches or maybe some coaches who may be set in their ways, but the idea of a 1v1 is that simple example that we said there of a face-up 1v1 or an isolated 1v1. But in reality, 1v1s happen every second in every game. So just like you said, if you can create some sort of a 3v3 or a 4v4 small-sided game, but your constant focus is still 1v1s.
100%. I mean, you can work on it from playing out the back as well. I mean, I see a lot of coaches where their goalkeeper will play it to their defender and they're told, right, 2 touches, 1 to control, 1 to get it up the field. I tell you what, the easiest way to break an opposition high press is off the dribble. And it's brave, yes. Is it going to be rewarding? Yes. So it's risk versus reward. High risk, high reward. If your players make mistakes, who cares? They're young, you 8, you 9, you 10. And you know what? If you're doing it with 14, 15, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, they're still young. They're still learning. It's a development stage. It's not the World Cup. It's not the MLS. It's not the Premier League. Like, you have to enable your players to make mistakes in key areas in order to improve. You look at Marcelo for Real Madrid. When he receives the ball at left back, how many times does he beat the opposition right midfielder? If he loses the ball, okay, there's a chance they'll concede. But as soon as he breaks the pressure from that right midfielder, Real Madrid get into the attacking third in 4, 5, 6 seconds.
Changes the game.
If you can replicate that in practice, get your goalkeeper playing out the back to centre backs, left back, right back, and then bang, you've got your one-on-one there. You've got a little grid there, and you've got a little functional practice. But you've made it realistic to the game. And yet again, when they get to the weekend, they've been in this scenario before where they have a sideline here, goalie here, and a defender here. They're going to increase their success. And these are the little key details to one-on-ones that I think people miss. I mean, even just doing the face-up, I pass you, you attack me, they still have their benefits, but is it game-related to the weekend? If it's not game-related, you have to think to yourself, how can I make it realistic to the game?
So then how do you coach in these moments? You're playing a 3v3, 4v4, whatever it is, and your focus is 1v1s. Do you have like a language that you're encouraging of your players? Do you have key qualities of players that they understand their position profiles and know what's expected of them? How are you delivering these?
So when you're 1v1, I don't think it's about positivity. It's about confidence. When you first start coaching players that aren't necessarily comfortable in a 1v1, they're going to be nervous. They're going to attack the defender one-on-one. They're then going to turn their back. They're then going to shield the ball, and then nothing's going to happen for 30 seconds. So the first thing that I say to my players is, I don't care if you lose the ball. I don't care. But you can't just say, I don't care, and then when they lose the ball, you have a horrific face on you. You look miserable, you're angry, you're frowning. You can't do that. You have to allow the players to realize what you say is the truth. So all of my players, I don't care if you lose the ball. Honestly, I don't care. If they lose the ball, I'll smile, I'll laugh, I'll go, well, you tried it. Didn't quite work though, did it? Have another go. Go on, give it another go. If they feel like you're not going to shout at them for losing the ball, which a lot of coaches do in this country and probably every country around the world. When I grew up in England, my coach would shout at me for losing the ball. If your players realize that you're not going to shout at them, they are going to get better, and they're going to get better quickly. And I just have a lot of these phrases that I just manipulate the words. I don't care if you lose the ball. Don't be afraid to fail. That's another one. If your player knows that there's no repercussions for failing, they're going to have a great time and they're going to try it more. If I told my player, don't be afraid to fail, and you told your player, do not fail in this one-on-one, it will be your player that turns the back and comes back and plays more negatively. It's mine that's going to try and beat that player. And if he goes past him, we're going to have a shot at goal. So it's just getting coaches to jump on the bandwagon of it's okay for kids to mess up. That's how they learn. Mistakes help us get better.
I read an article yesterday, working on a blog post for that right now, actually, about the idea that the game is completely influenced by the sideline, and especially on young children, that you're probably familiar with the players that look over their shoulder at their parents every time they do something because they feel like they are impressing or living and playing for their parents because their parents care about it a lot. And the same could be said for coaches, that the players know the moment they make a mistake how that coach is going to behave. So if you are true to your word, and if you genuinely, I don't care that you've lost the ball because you've tried, and it's not that I don't care if you lose the ball. I think that's really important for people to understand, because I think you and I are both passionate enough about the game that we want to win, and the way that we're going to help you to try and win the game is by playing the best soccer that you can. And we don't just lose the ball. Nobody just loses the ball, but you may lose it from a failed 1v1. But then you made a really good point about like the repetition. So do it again, do it again, do it again. And so you have a lot of repetition of 1v1s within practice, within the small-sided games. It's a constant focus for you. So the players, I'm assuming, are constantly exposed to success, but they're constantly exposed to failure too.
Oh, 100%. And the beauty of 1v1s is if they lose the ball doing a certain trick, for instance, they know themselves what they did wrong. They know themselves what they can do better, and they know themselves how to fix it. I mean, when you and I were growing up, how many times a day, how many hours a day would we spend kicking a ball around with our mates? There was no coaches there. There was no players there, parents there, sorry. No one told us how to do things. I mean, doing a bicycle kick, using the outside of your foot, doing a volley, doing a half volley. We never got coached this growing up. It was just repetition of failing. Like, you watch these kids today, you don't see like a half volley, like a Steven Gerrard in the Champions League. Like, it doesn't happen. But you don't coach these kind of things. They come with repetition, and it's the same as one-on-ones, whatever you want to work on, striking a ball. It's just these kids learn by failing. They don't need an adult. They don't need a coach shouting at them for making mistakes. It really annoys me. It really does.
Yeah, I agree that we can. I think maybe that's why you're in the successful position that you're in, that people recognize that you've hit a nail on the head there in terms of A, how you connect with the players, and then B, how you create the environment for them to succeed, but then to fail. But ultimately, they are learning. And a lot of people will say about how important the practice environment is. Well, if you have set a standard for your environment where players will know that they will fail and that they will have success, and that at the younger ages it's not going to affect their status or position on a team or playing time, then you've got a perfect environment in which these players are able to be free and have some fun. And like you say, learn. And you make a really interesting point. I don't know if I've ever really seen any player in youth games strike a half volley. That's a really interesting point. I just remember playing on the park as a kid, and when I was growing up, it was, I'm sure it's similar for you, Tony Yeboah just hit that bar and in. So all we ever tried to do was score a Yeboah. That was all we ever tried to do. And it didn't matter how you did it, whether it was a volley, half volley, like a strike from the ground, whatever it was. You just try and score a Yeboah. And as soon as someone scored a Yeboah, that was it. Like, it was, the game stopped. We were all celebrating and wishing that we had the technology that we could watch it over and over again. Imagine that now. Imagine if we were playing that as kids. Imagine we'd just be blowing TikTok and Instagram up with all of this material, because I scored some great goals, man, and they're underappreciated because no one ever got to see them like they could now.
100%. 100%. I remember, if you scored a great goal in the playground, you'd have 19 kids chasing you around. You'd be doing your Alan Shearer, one arm in the air.
Running around.
Exactly. I just want to go back to standards quickly, because you mentioned the word standards, and it's really one thing I want to hit. As we said, it's all right to fail, and it's all right to lose the ball, but you've got to have standards in the way you do it. I mean, if my kids are losing the ball and then they're not working to get it back, or they're losing the ball because they're not executing what we've been working on in practice, then that's where I go, look, this needs to be better. You need to do this how we've been learning. You need to do this what we've been talking about. So I'm enabling the kids to make mistakes, and I'm enabling the kids to learn from the mistakes, but there still has to be standards. And in order to have standards, you've got to have things that are non-negotiable. So for me, non-negotiable is the greatest new phrase that I've started to use, because it holds the kids accountable. So let's just say in a 1v1, if you lose the ball, you have to work and win it back. Non-negotiable. It is non-negotiable. If you lose it, you have to win it back. If you are, for instance, if you're working with older kids and you're a fullback and the opposition winger is by the sideline, it is non-negotiable that that player cuts back inside. If you have a player by the sideline, you force them out wide, you keep going that way. It is non-negotiable that they come in here. So if you set standards with your teams and they know what they can and can't get away with, that is also how you're going to develop your players individually.
Such a good point in terms of standards. And I think about working with the older players that I work with. Part of our model is that it allows individuals to be creative, but there's an expectation on teammates to provide cover. So talk about defending in attack and just being prepared, that the players understand that they enable a player to be creative and to be successful by providing cover, so that, yes, a player is going to try and win the ball back, but it's not always possible because they fall over or they're off balance, and it's difficult for them to catch up from a player that's just played a 30-yard pass. But as a team, we're enabling that player, and that's been a really big thing for me in my environment, of enabling players to be successful by creating this whole team cohesion around allowing that.
100%. I mean, I only mentioned it on a 1-versus-1 scale, right? But you can do it as a team, and it all goes back to how you want your teams to play. I mean, you can say to your team, it's non-negotiable that my number 9 goes and presses, and then the line behind it do not go. It's non-negotiable that my midfield line step up and my defensive line stay, because then the gaps are too big. So just by using this term, you can really implement and create a style of play within your team, because it's black and white. This is what we do, this is what we don't do. And if you have them standards and you have them keywords and you have that style of play that you want your players to learn, by using this term, they're naturally going to get better, and they're going to buy into what you want from them because they know what you want from them.
Amazing, isn't it? And I preach this a lot, that the more we tell our players, the more I use things like Tactical Pad, and I send my players what practice is going to be. Here is what we are doing tonight. Here is the animation. And they know it. So they already understand the task before they get there, just like our game model. They all receive a copy of the game model. And part of our preseason is to talk with them about what they think should or should not be within the game model. And then everybody understands and everybody knows. And it's not a secret, just like that. They're non-negotiables. We include the players, or we let them know exactly what the expectations are. And if you don't like it, then maybe this isn't the place for you. But there is no way that you can turn around and say, oh, I didn't know that, because I've done everything I can to share with you all of this information that we've got, that we built as a team. And you think about building this team cohesion when everybody's working for the same goal, for the same reason, just makes it that little bit easier.
Oh, 100%. I mean, as we're on the topic of game model, we'll quickly just talk about that. Every coach should, even in its most simplistic form, should know how they want to attack, how they want to defend, how they want to play when they win it, how they want to play when they lose it. And game model is like this new word that's been going around for a little while now on Twitter. But for those of you that don't know, I mean, it's when you, and I'm going to break it down into its literally most simplistic form. When you have the ball, do you want to go long or do you want to play short? Do you want to play direct or possession? If you're defending, do you want to drop deep or do you want to press high? When you win the ball, do you want to get behind the ball in good numbers, or do you want to counter press and try and win it back as soon as possible? When you win it, do you try and keep it, or do you go forward, counter attack, find your 9 straight away? So you've got 2 options there per each moment of the game, being the 4 moments. And if you can just break that down, even at U9 level, even at U8 level, your players will know what to do, instead of just saying, right, Jimmy, you're right defender, Johnny, you're left defender, Luke, you're centre mid, go play, go have fun. Your players are not going to know what to do. If you have that game model and your players know what you want to do in each of the 4 moments, you're going to have more success.
So again, another just such a simple idea and concept, right? We build this understanding, we build this knowledge around the game that we just want to help. We want to make this easier or better. And as a coach, if you're listening to this and you haven't begun to write this down, and I've covered this in other podcasts too, just sit down, as Mark says there, the 4 moments of the game, and then just begin to identify what you like. Do you like a certain coach or a certain team style? Everybody likes Barcelona. Is that something that's something that you would like to see your players try and do? Are they going to be able to do it? Probably not. But until you write it down and until you begin to build your environment around that same approach, you're not going to get anything out of it anyway. So you might as well start writing this down and start formulating this as you move along. Get your players involved in it. See what they want to do too.
I mean, yeah, I just want to give nuggets of information. I think too many coaches are trying to keep everything for them. I think we're in such a small world where we need to help each other. So any little nuggets of information we can give, and this is why these podcasts are great. I mean, I've listened to everyone, and you pick up little things, even if it's the same subject, the same topic, but with a different person. You pick up little key details, and if you keep listening and keep learning and keep putting yourself out there to learn, you're going to improve and you're going to become a better coach.
So let's go into opposed and unopposed. And I know this is a topic that I put out in another podcast recently about how we get in this idea of technical development for players, and kind of we'll include some of that here. But the idea of a traditional opposed versus unopposed, I mean, it's an argument. People have their preferences. Where do you stand on it?
So this is something I feel tremendously passionate about, because I've been playing with both for about 10 years now. I'll start with unopposed, because this seems to be up for debate a lot at the moment on Twitter. People hating it and slating it and saying, "Oh no, there's no decision making," etc. Unopposed. First of all, you look at ball mastery at the younger ages. It is crucial. It is crucial that players learn to love the ball. How do they learn to love the ball? Give them a ball each. Give them a ball each. Let them get used to it. Let them have fun with it. They will use the sole of their foot, inside of their foot, outside of their foot. They'll manipulate the ball. They'll learn how the ball reacts off their foot. So you start at a very young age unopposed. Yeah, great, ball mastery. But then you start to move up into, U9, U10, U11. How do you create ideas for your players to execute? So, for instance, I love my players to get third man runs in. I like my players to get into backspace so we can get a shot on goal. How do you teach players timing and triggers of movements? For me, the pattern play that comes with unopposed work to give your players the ideas are absolutely fantastic. I had two new teams last year. I did the simple end zone game, right? Where you have to pass into a teammate making a run into the end zone.
Yeah.
With one of my teams, I did pattern play for about 15, 20, 25 minutes of different movements to get into there. With the other team, I was like, right, I'm going to go straight into a pose. And I said, look, this is what I want you to do. I showed them one example of a third man run. I showed them one example of maybe a channel run. And the team that had more success in the small-sided game was the team that did it in pattern play, because they had more repetition of what I was asking them. When it was the opposed group and I showed them one demonstration, maybe two demonstrations of what I wanted, it still wasn't clear to them. It still wasn't natural for them. They hadn't done it before. It was something new to them. So to ask players to do something completely new in an environment they don't know about, you're not going to have that success. Whereas if you spend 15, 20 minutes just breaking it down, no opposition, making it clear to them, painting the picture. This is the picture I want to see in this moment of the game. Can you now go and execute it after 15, 20 minutes of continuously doing it against opponents? And personally, for me, being able to do two sessions back to back on the same day, but coaching them differently, made me realize how important unopposed work is.
It's a real study that you just performed. You should have written that up and sold that.
I can go into more detail and write a book about it. It's interesting, honestly.
That's so. Then a typical counter argument to that would be that maybe they've just learned to play that way, and so then how does that translate to the game? So in terms of suddenly the opponent is doing things differently, so they've mastered the task of playing into the end zone, then how does that translate to what the game looks like? I guess would be a typical argument there.
Yeah, 100%. And this isn't me just saying everything needs to be unopposed, because I am a huge fan of opposed work. So I try and break it down into my season. So when I get new teams, I will tend to do unopposed work for maybe the first 30 minutes or so of a session. These are the ideas we're trying to implement. Then we'll go opposed. But then as the season goes on, your unopposed work becomes less, because once they know the ideas, for me, that's the moment to then get off unopposed, make it opposed as much as we can. I only use unopposed work to give them the key ideas, the key principles of play that I'm trying to introduce. So once my players understand that, bang, we can go into opposed work. We can start opposed every session if they know what you're looking for. But until your players know,
you do that with older players too?
I personally do. I mean, the Cal Women's Club team that I do, they're adults, right? The oldest player on the team's in her 30s. When I went into that team, it was a mess. There was no style of play. They didn't know how to build. They didn't know how to switch play. It was, I was looking back at it and going, right, we've got a lot of work to do here. I brought it back to basics. And went, right, this is what we're going to do. These are the key patterns of play we're going to introduce in the game. And don't get me wrong, when you do a pattern of play in practice, it's not going to always come out in the game. But if you do a pattern of play for 6-7 passes, but only 1 or 2 passes come out in a game, you still had success because part of your pattern has been introduced and you've been able to keep the ball. So we did a lot of unopposed
to like the idea of sharing a model. We're giving answers, and if we're giving answers or we're giving some solutions, then that can only be a positive for our players' success.
Oh, 100%. Because when you do unopposed work, you're giving them a repertoire of different answers to use. You are giving them 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 answers. I don't know. But then it's down to the players to realize what one of them to do in a game-related situation. So, yes, you don't get that decision-making in unopposed work, but when it goes to oppose and you've given them so many answers, they're able to implement what you've taught them. It's like you're in a maths class, right? Your teacher's telling you everything. She's teaching you about the length of triangles. She's teaching you about algebra. She's teaching you about everything. You don't know what's going to come up in that test. There might not even be a question about algebra. There might not even be a question about triangles. But the more answers you have in your brain when it comes to the test, which in our line of work is the game, they're going to be able to have more success because they have more knowledge of what to expect.
So how do you bring competition? And I say that because I'm so familiar with seeing a traditional, and I'm going to call it ugly, unopposed environment where it's one player doing something while everybody else is in a line watching. And I know that's not what you mean by unopposed work here, but how do you then bring in competition or that game environment into this unopposed practice that you're working through with your players?
So let's just say you're working on third man runs, right? You're working on third man runs. You've got 13 players at practice. So you've got your goalkeeper there, then you've got 12 players left. What I would do, I would separate the 12 into 3 groups of 4. You have a red team, a blue team, and a green team. You show them the pattern you want. You work on your movement off the ball. You break down the key technical aspects, punching the pass in, communication, time turn, man on, all the key details that are crucial for keeping the ball. You break that down into the pattern of play. Communication, punching the pass in, movement off the ball, timing of the run, weight of the pass. And you hold them to a high standard. If they're doing this pattern of play and you say first is 3 points wins and the blue team score a goal, you say, no, that wasn't what I expected of you. You didn't punch the pass in. You didn't give communication with the pass. The timing of the run was too slow. So you hold them to a high standard. And as soon as you make it competitive and as soon as you hold them to that standard where they're like, oh, I really want to impress coach. We keep scoring, but he's not giving us the goal. Come on, let's try and work hard to get the goal. All of a sudden, you have a fluid, exciting, fun, competitive practice where they're developing and they're learning and they're getting better. And the standard is so high that you can see them improve. Now, don't get me wrong. If you have these coaches that just do patterns of play and don't coach the key details, they just say A passes to B, B passes to C, that is pointless. That is absolutely pointless. I see coaches doing pattern play where they don't even teach their players to check away from a cone which acts as a defender. They're just saying you pass to him and then you score. That is pointless for me. As you say, there's no benefit of that in the game. But if you make it competitive, break it down, and you hold them to that standard, they're going to improve.
So then I completely agree with you. And I think in listening, the idea of opposed for most people is that you're adding in a defender or an opponent or whatever your situation is that you're creating in terms of creating opposition, that you're expecting the defender to create the competition and the drive and the desire to succeed and to be competitive and to dominate that practice, when actually we talked about motivation early on. You talk about how to challenge your players in their small group being the best there, then you could equally and often, I'd say you could probably even create more competition if you set it up right by allowing things like that, the first team to score 3 goals, the first team to do whatever against the other 2 teams. And I know from working with a guy a couple of years ago that he would do a passing pattern and a combination, and it would include third man runs and things like that. And it got to a point where it would kind of culminate in a competition of the first or the last team remaining keeping possession of the ball at a certain tempo. So there was a time limit in which they could complete this certain passing exercise. And then every minute or so, as they got better, the time that you could perform that exercise in would drop by a couple of seconds. So then the intensity got higher and higher, and then suddenly everybody was just so much more on edge. And I think about that. Could that be replicated with one or two or three defenders in the way? I don't think it could.
No, I don't think so, because then you lose the repetition of it as well. And the point of these unopposed exercises is to give the repetitions in, right? You need to get them repetitions in order to improve. The more you do something, the better you're going to be at it. It's not my opinion. That's just facts. You have the likes of, Steph Curry. Does he only play in games? No, he practices shots by himself, unopposed. Who else? Tom Brady, American football player. Does he just play in games with defenders running at him? No, he does unopposed. He practices his throwing. He does stuff that doesn't require defenders. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I am a massive fan of opposed and unopposed. What annoys me is when I go on Twitter and people are saying, only one is correct. Only this is correct. Why? Why does one thing have to be correct? Why can't we use both in your practices throughout the season to develop players in every aspect of their game?
Make a really good point about the individuals that are challenging themselves. And I just read Kobe Bryant's book too, The Mamba Mentality, and there's just the stuff that he went through. He'd finish a game, and when everybody had left, he would go back in the gym and still carry on shooting, and still, like, there was no opposition. There's nobody trying to take the ball from him. It's quote unquote nothing like the game that he had just played in with 20,000 fans and opponents in his face, but he's still doing it. And he's still, you create this muscle memory, this idea that you know what you're doing in those moments. And so to really understand what you're saying is that you would start with unopposed early on in the season, whether it's a new team or you're introducing concepts. And then throughout the season, that would slowly move away from this unopposed idea because you've begun to build the framework and the understanding that now you become more opposed, and you start to play more game type situations that will replicate what you did in the unopposed, but now they have the foundation from which to be successful from.
Oh, 100%. So now I'm going into the spring season, which in America is the second half of the season. So now a lot of my work will be opposed. And then people ask, okay, why are you doing opposed work now? Without opposition, you don't develop their speed of play. And if you want a quicker speed of play, you have to maximize the opposed work. But what is speed of play if you lack the ideas in the first place? So if I don't spend time in full season working on the ideas, I might have a great speed of play, but I'm keeping 450 passes ticking over together in my own half. So only go to opposed once they have the ideas, but then that's where the magic happens. Because not only is it crucial for speed of play, it's crucial for decision making. Because, as I said earlier, players have to recognize what to do in each situation depending on the opposition, depending on the game on the weekend. So decision making is such an important factor in soccer, in any sport, in any opposed sport, and even in golf, in unopposed work. Decision making is the number one, whether you're going to be a good player or a great player. And the thing is, if a team that only ever do unopposed work, they will never be able to play at a high level. It is impossible. You cannot do 90 minutes of unopposed work each and every week and play at a high level, because you have to react off opponents. You have to react off timing of players, movement, space, angles. There are so many factors that improve in opposed work, which is why I believe that as soon as you get your ideas across to your players, you have to then hit opposed work as much as you can. You can't be towards the end of the season still spending 30, 40 minutes on opposed work, because, as I said 2 minutes ago, as soon as you hit the opposed work, that's where the magic happens.
So then what does a typical training session look like for you? You're doing an hour or an hour and a half, and it's early on in the season, you're working through predominantly unopposed work. What would that look like in terms of a full session?
So I actually still like the approach they stated on my FA level 2, which I did probably back in 2010. Now must be 10 years ago.
Back in the black and white days.
Yeah, I know, right? Tell me about that. That was but you know what? That's actually the approach I've really enjoyed the most. So it started off with unopposed work to get your topic in. It then went to your next stage where you'd add maybe 1 or 2 defenders to see, can they implement your ideas, still give them that repetition, but with a little bit more pressure. And then you get to your stage 3 where all of a sudden you might be playing 1 number up, you might be playing even numbers, but now you've got full pressure. Can you implement the idea? And then you have your stage 4, you have your game where you sit back and then you watch, and have they been able to build upon and introduce what you've been working on in practice into the game at the end. And I personally, as a coach, I've found that way of building your session has been successful, but it changes throughout the season. So let's say my stage 1 at the beginning of the season, which is my unopposed work, I might work on that for 25 minutes, maybe 20 minutes or so. But then towards maybe halfway through the season, my stage 1 might be 5 minutes, and then bang, let's get the opposition in. And then by the end of the season, you might just go straight into your stage 2. Let's add defenders straight away. Let's improve that speed of play and decision making straight from minute 1.
Do you do a lot of the same sort of content in terms of sessions? Do you have a new session every time you get on the field with your players? How do you deal with that?
I personally don't have a problem with coaches replicating sessions, especially sessions that work. But a thing for me is, if you replicate the same session, give them different coaching points so they still feel like it's new. I always, when I go into a session, I have 2 things I want to teach them, 2 coaching points, 2 team tactical principles, what I want them to learn. No more, no less. I don't want to overload them, jack of all trades, master of none.
Sure.
I don't want to go in there not teaching them anything. So when I'm planning my session, I have 2 key things I want them to learn. For the younger ages, let's just say you're working with U8s. It might be, right, today we're going to work on passing to your teammate's back foot so they can turn, and also punching that pass in so it doesn't get intercepted. They're going to make so many mistakes in different areas of their game, but they're the 2 key things I want them to learn. So I'm going to build my session upon them. I might then, let's just say in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, or even the next session, do exactly the same session I did. I might then have 2 different coaching points, such as how do I receive the ball and how do I receive the ball to either go forward or to go back and protect myself from a defender. So even though it's the same session, you're giving completely different coaching points. Even for yourself, it will feel like a new session because you're bringing different topics out of it.
And I asked that really in terms of, I really appreciate using, and it's a lot of similar structure environment for me. So I use a lot of the same setup, but just like you say, we implement different ideas or different challenges or different coaching points like that, because the amount of players I've seen that have gone to a session and stuff that I've watched, and in San Francisco, is pretty funny that you're on a 4-field complex, and every local rival club is also training on the field. So I like to watch and see what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And the amount of kids that are standing there completely confused by whatever this game is that the coach has created or found on YouTube is quite entertaining. And I watch these kids that have no idea, and the coach loses his mind and he's stressed out. And so the reason I asked that is because of that. If you can have an understanding of simple setups that you can cover a lot of things with, then I think that's a huge step forward for people to have simple and early success with their players.
Oh, 100%. I mean, let's just say that you practice twice a week. So you practice Tuesday and a Thursday. On Tuesday, I'm going to teach them 2 things, only just 2 things. It's all I'm going to hit. Thursday, 2 things. That's it. So that's 4 things you've taught them that week. Doesn't sound a lot. 4 things. That's all you've taught them. But let's just say that, especially in America where they're playing pretty much all year round, let's say you practice 40 weeks out of the 52 weeks in a year. So all of a sudden you times 4 by 40, and you've got 160 things, coaching points that you can teach your players. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'll replicate the same coaching point, in a different session. So it might not be 160 different things, but you've given them 160 coaching points in that 1 year to go away with. That all adds up. That all maximizes development. So strip back your sessions is what I personally recommend. Hit 2 things you really want to hit, nail them, give them repetition of them 2 things, and by the end of the year, you've got 160 coaching points that they've come away with, and then they've learned so much.
Simple, huh?
It's simple. It's just like when I do my team lineup. I'm like, I'm going to win today if I just put this player there. It's simple. You put it on paper. It doesn't quite come out like that. Liz.
Of course. So that, yeah, if I'm a coach listening to this, biggest takeaways or my understanding is that the more thought you give this, and the more logic that you can apply to it, as you said, even just from a foundation level of giving yourself 2 points or 2 themes or 2 principles that you want your players to understand and to at least begin to understand within one session, stick with them. And the amount of times you see people meandering through, and this and this and this and this, but you can stay true to yourself in that environment, your players are going to appreciate it, because now you've got almost a simple session that whatever your environment is, whether it's a 3v3, 4v4 game or unopposed early on, whatever it looks like, now suddenly you have a simple and clear session for your players to learn from, to take away, to not stand there confused, and ultimately to have success, or at least to have an element of fun in some sort of task mastery.
Oh, I mean, 100%. I mean, we've actually hit a lot of nuggets today. We've spoken about a lot of things, and I think there's a lot of tips and tricks, especially for the new coaches and even ones that have been coaching for a while, they can take away from this. But it's just about having a clear plan, and it's sticking true to your beliefs. I mean, I love unopposed and I love opposed. I have my reasons for them, so I do both. I think as long as coaches have a clear rationale behind why they do something, they can't go wrong. My game model, I have my game model, I split it up into the 4 moments of the game, and I teach my players how I want to do things. Your game model might be completely different to mine. And in fact, every coach's game model will be completely different to everyone else's. But as long as they have a reason behind why they do something, they're going to be successful. They're going to be successful as a coach. They're going to help their players get better. But it just kills me when I see coaches out there without a plan. They don't really have a game model. They don't know what they're coaching their players. What are your 2 coaching points today? They don't know. They just stutter. They don't give me an answer. If you know what you're delivering, if you know why you're delivering it, and you know how to deliver it, you're going to have a great career in coaching.
So then let me ask you, from both your technical director role and your coaching role, do you think that the club should be providing that sort of material, or do you think it should be on the coach, and then a technical director or a director of coaching or whatever the role is within the club is there to just support them?
So there's different approaches that I see local clubs doing. One of them is a technical director creates a handbook, designs the sessions, and they say to the coach, you have to do this session on this day. And then you go to their field and you've got 8 teams up there all doing the exact same session. It looks like a factory. It's like a factory of robots just doing the same thing. And then you have the other clubs, such as our club. We give our coaches the freedom to create their own sessions, adapt their game model for the players that they have, because I think that's crucial. If you've got 3 centre-backs, why are you going to play a 4-back? If you've got 2 strikers, why are you going to play 1 forward? But they get an input into their system, they get an input into their game model. But as long as they have a rationale and a reason, and they've thought about why they are doing a certain thing, then we give them that freedom to learn and get better. Because we're not only in this job to help the kids get better, we're here to get us better. We have to improve as ourselves as coaches. And if we have someone that just gives us a curriculum and says, right, you're doing this session, you're never looking at sessions yourself. You're never adapting. You're never thinking. You're never going out of your way to improve, because you've always got someone just spoon feeding you information.
So true. But I think there may be a place for it in terms of, think about a a parent that's volunteering, and if we, as a technical director or as a director of some form, are responsible for helping this coach, I think that we can provide simple material that can help give them some guidance and help them have success with their players, because ultimately, if we lose those players, then we failed, right? But I think in the club environment, I agree with you that every coach should have their why. They should have an element of a model that they are able to bring to everything that they do and kind of live by.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, if there's a parent coach, for instance, that's asking for help and needs help, the best thing you can do is give them resources, give them the sessions. They love it. They're so thankful. And it's brilliant, because then you can make sure that the players in your club are still working on what you want them to work on. Whereas if you have a coach, for instance, that wants to get better, wants to develop, wants to do their coaching licenses, wants to improve, then I feel you have to give them that leeway to develop and create a style and philosophy and game plan to improve themselves. Because from the hierarchy, from the DOCs down to the TDs, it's our job to help the coaches improve. And we have to listen to what they want. How do they want to improve? If they want to run their own sessions, we have to let them. You can't say you have to do these sessions. They're going to get bored. They're most likely going to quit. And then all of a sudden, you've got a roundabout of coaches coming in and out.
So I want to, as we wrap up here, I want to revisit a note that you added, and it says that soccer is 1v1 with help. That just, I feel like, sums up your passion for breaking the game down. And this may be from your experience in working with younger players and appreciating their need for the game to be at their level as opposed to being at the adult level, where we typically look at younger kids playing two bigger sides fields. But the idea that soccer is 1v1, there's all 1v1s all over the place, but soccer 1v1 with help.
Oh, 100%. I mean, let's just say you're doing 2 versus 2s, a small exercise, 2 versus 2s in practice. Whoever is the player on the ball, whoever is the closest defender, that is the 1 versus 1. Then all of a sudden, it's, where is my help? My help is my covering defender. Can I maybe force the game onto him? You break it down into an even bigger scale, right? So now your team has just won the ball, 11 versus 11. 11 versus 11 game, you've just won the ball. You're now 2 versus 1 against their centre-back. You've transitioned well. I have the ball, closest defender is here. It's me versus him in a 1 versus 1. My teammate is my help. He's my help, 2 versus 1. So what am I going to do? I'm going to drive at the defender. I'm going to draw the defender. Then I'm going to pass to my help. 1 versus 1. There's the help. There we score. If you break down the 11 versus 11 game into 1 versus 1s all over the field, and you outplay your opponent, and you get the better of your opponent, your direct opponent, you're going to win the game.
So there you go, everyone. Soccer is 1v1 with help.
I wish it was that easy, mate. I wish it was that easy.
But with an idea and with a model and with an approach and a communication with your environment, your players, your parents, your other coaches, it really can be that easy in terms of at least understanding the application. Of course, the game is the game. You never know what you're going to get. But if you have these complex ideas that you've been able to break down with a careful thought and a careful process, that it's something that you approach over a season or over a year. As you said, we're about to head into spring, so we're entering round 2 now. That you should really start seeing, if you've had a complete model that you've worked from the fall season now coming into spring, it should be pretty evident in the way that you're playing. It should be obvious that your players can answer questions. And to wrap up, I did a session a couple of weeks ago, and it's our winter training in San Francisco. So we combine a lot of our age groups together for group trainings and for player movement, things like that. And we had a bunch of 2003, 2002 players who aren't playing high school that are training. And I asked them, what do they do in certain moments in a game? And they were kind of like, I said, well, the fact that you don't have an answer, it says it all, really. And one of my 2007 players was there. And so I said, what do we do in the middle third? How do we break into the attacking third? And he gave me an answer straight away. He's like, we're going to try and play into the wings if we can. I said, so how do we set that up? He's like, we may play an up and back, or we may play a quick switch. I said, okay, cool. And then the older kids are just looking at me like, what? I said, yeah, imagine having the answers. Could you imagine having the answers? So whether your answers are this complex game model, or if we go even as simple as working with our youngest players and identifying these 1v1s and how the 1v1 dominates the game, then we're going to have success and we're going to have a good time with it. Our players are going to really enjoy it too.
100%.
So, Mark, thank you so much, mate. Have we missed anything? Anything you feel that we need to share more? How can people connect with you, follow along in Mark Savvides' world?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter, Mark_S92. I upload tactical pad sessions on there. I haven't done so in a while. It's been an extremely busy period, but I'm going to start getting on that again. So anyone that wants help with sessions, or they can just drop me an email. I'm always happy to help coaches. I think as a coaching community, we've got to help each other. It's a small world. We've got to help each other improve for not only the benefit of us, but for the benefit of the players.
Magic. Mark, thank you so much, mate.
Thank you, Lee. Take care.
So a huge thank you to Mark for joining us today. The content and just the simple discussions that we explore there, from the 1v1s to unopposed and opposed, is so valuable, and he comes at it from such a logical, unemotional point, and he mentioned how many people are passionate about it being one way or the other, but he's very logical in his understanding and his reasoning of what he does, and it always results back to he's doing it for his players. So please do connect with Mark. Let he and I know what you thought of this episode. Leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and more podcasts coming from Heads and Volleys real soon. And if you are looking for anything else out there, I recommend that you follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm always constantly trying to share as much information as I have and what I know and the things that I like. So follow me as always at Lead on Soccer.